Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki, for today's live webinar. Our topic today is addressing STEM workforce needs in a virtual world, how ATE grants can help and why you should apply. A couple of announcements before we get going. The webinar will be recorded. You'll automatically receive a link to the recording. And please use that chat window in the upper right of the screen. You're in listen-only mode today, but we'll have plenty of opportunities, plenty of question breaks to ask questions of our expert panelists. Let's go ahead and continue with the webinar. We're currently being recorded. It's my pleasure to mention the people that will be on today. Jonathan Beck, he's the Executive Director and Principal Investigator of one of the newest ATE centers called the National Center for Autonomous Technologies. So welcome to Jonathan. Also joining and first up today will be Dr. Celeste Carter, the lead ATE Program Director at the National Science Foundation. Also joining, and you just heard his audio check-in, is Kevin Cooper, the PI of RCNet. He's also the Dean of Advanced Technology down in Florida at Indian River State College. And also joining us, Michelle Norgren, Director and PI of the Vesta National Center in Missouri. Let's get started. It's my pleasure now today to welcome Dr. Celeste Carter, again, the NSF Program Director and ATE Lead Program Officer. Dr. Carter was previously, some time ago, Celeste, I think, a faculty member at a community college. She understands the things that we're going through. It's a pleasure to have her here today. So go ahead, Celeste.
So thank you very much, Mike. And yes, I was...
Now, Celeste, your volume is low again. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. Let me... How's that?
Better?
It's
a little better. Would you? That's a little better. Can you do it more?
Okay, I did it more.
Okay, that's a little too high. I'm sorry, folks.
Okay, that's all right. Sorry. Okay, how's that?
No, I think that sounds pretty good. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Okay. So thank you, Mike, and welcome everyone who is attending online. It's great to know that as many people are interested in the program and are logging on to hear this presentation, this webinar today. As excuse me, as Mike said, I am the lead program director for the Advanced Technological Education program at the National Science Foundation, and I was a faculty member at Foothill College in California for 15 years. So as Mike said, I really do understand the culture of community and technical colleges, and it's just it's been a privilege, and it still is a privilege to serve at the National Science Foundation as the lead on this program. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to present to you today. The next slide shows the agenda. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the National Science Foundation. I know usually on these webinars we have a combination of people who have already heard this and know a little bit about or a lot about NSF, and then people who are kind of tuning in for the first time. So I'll tell you a little bit about the NSF agency itself, opportunities that are available to you through the Advanced Technological Education program, and then I'll turn it over to the other center directors who are here, and they'll talk a little bit about their background and expertise in virtual teaching and learning strategies through ATE. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the ATE proposal resources that are available to you should you decide, hopefully, that you want to craft an ATE proposal. So before we get started with that, the next slide has a quick poll. And Mike, if you could open up that poll. Just gives you a quick, oh boy, it really is fast. It's kind of fun to see the numbers jumping around. Okay, Mike, so let's, still jumping around a little bit. Okay, so let's close the.
Looks like they got the, looks like faculty are the lead, and a bunch of other folks as well.
Right, administrators and grant writers, which is great. It's a nice combination. Really that serves as an excellent team for crafting one of these proposals. Since you need faculty leadership, you need an administrator that supports you, and it's great to have a grant writer who can help you get everything crafted. Okay, so let me move on, and let's look at what the National Science Foundation looks like organizational-wise. So this chart shows you the most recent set of people who are working at the National Science Foundation. And I say recent because we have had for the past 6 years Dr. France Cordova as our director for the National Science Foundation, and she actually finished her term at the end of March. We all got to say goodbye to her online, thanks to the pandemic. And Dr. Kelvin Drogemeyer has been appointed as the acting director of the National Science Foundation. I mention this because he is also the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, and he is a very big supporter of the ATE program. If you look just to the right, you'll see that there's a governing board for the National Science Foundation called the National Science Board. And they have recently completed a study, a special task force on really the ATE program as it focuses on 2-year institutions of higher education and the kinds of programs that we all support through the ATE program. So another great strong support for that. One other thing to point out is that the ATE program was developed following the passage of a bill in 1992, the SATA bill, Scientific and Advanced Technology Act, and it's never been really reauthorized. They've fiddled around with it a little bit in Congress with some wording, but both the House Science Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee are currently crafting bills to reauthorize the ATE program. So I just wanted to give you that sort of a background to say there's a lot of interest in the ATE program. If you look now where there's one of the squares is highlighted in red, that tells you where the ATE program is located. It's circling the Education and Human Resources Directorate. The assistant director for that directorate is Dr. Karen Marangel, and you see her there. And then the next arrow up, and where the green arrow is pointing, just shows you the different divisions, and highlighted in blue is the Division of Undergraduate Education. So that's where we sit. If you look across that line, you're going to see that in a lot of ways, NSF looks a little bit like an academic institution. It's we've got the Division of Geosciences, we've got biology, we've got engineering, computer, and science. So it's a very interesting foundation or federal agency to work for because it really aligns very well with our administrative background. So that's great for sort of a brief overlook at NSF. How would you find the Advanced Technological Education Program? And this shows a screenshot of the NSF website, easy to find, nsf.gov. Now, whether or not you can, find your way around it, I know we all think our own websites are pretty easy to navigate, and I would say I think, gee, NSF is fairly easy to navigate, and people go, no, 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 no. And then I go, well, your institution website, I couldn't even find the faculty. So we all have our little things that work or don't work. But finding ATE is highlighted in red, and you can see there's a search box, and there's a couple of different ways you could find it. One is just to put ATE in there. You could also put Advanced Technological Education, or the number that's there, 18-571, is the current program solicitation. So if you use that and then say search, it's actually going to take you directly to a link where you can actually download the PDF of the solicitation itself. So a bunch of different ways you can find the ATE program. Another one, if you look at under research areas, and this isn't highlighted and we haven't dropped the box down, but you could find education and human resources in research areas. You could use that as another way to find not only ATE, but all the programs that are offered within any of the divisions in EHR, including the Division of Undergraduate Education. So, with that said, let's talk a little bit specifically about ATE. It's a very interesting program. As I said, 1992 was when the SATA Act was introduced and signed into law, so we're almost 27 years old. It's for NSF, in a sense, very different kind of program because it's a workforce development program. And it's a workforce development program that focuses on the education of highly qualified science and engineering technicians for advanced technology fields that drive our nation's economy. Very, very specifically, it places community and technical colleges or two-year institutions of higher education in leadership roles on all projects. So this is a community and technical college program, very clearly. As well, though, when this act was signed into law, the senators and congressmen who had proposed it, and as it went through, thought a lot about pathways. Although they didn't really call it pathways, we now go, oh yes, rigorous career pathways, career pathways. So what they did have is that could be very important to engage students in grades 7 through 12. 2-year, there's leadership there. And 4-year institutions could also be supported, because it would be nice to say an articulated pathway could be developed for educating this skilled technical workforce. So that was, I think, very, very forward thinking. The other one was they said partnerships have to be an important part of this program. And I would say probably the biggest one are your industry partnerships. If you're going to develop a course, develop a program, educate students with the idea that with some number of either certifications, stackable credentials, or a 2-year associate's degree, they'd really like to know that they could get a job when they get out. And they'd like to know that industry, where they are hoping to get a job, are going to look at them and say, you have the qualifications and skills that we're looking for. We'd really like to interview, and hey, here's your job offer. Additionally to that, we have economic development entities such as your workforce investment boards that might be very helpful in determining, when you look at your regional industry, where do they see big hiring needs? If you need cybersecurity technicians, they generally are gonna know about that. So that's kind of in a nutshell some of the really important points about the ATE program. But what does the program look like internally? Well, there are 4 program tracks in the Advanced Technological Education program. Projects, and if you look at the amount of money for a project, it says up to $600,000 for 3 years, which would say roughly $200,000 a year for up to 3 years. The next one is small grants for institutions new to ATE, and again, they're smaller. But in terms of the projects you can do, it's anything that you see under the usual set of things and projects could also be done for small grants. The third track are centers, and you're going to hear from some of the center directors, and we have now 2 types of centers. We have the very large scale national centers, and then once those have sort of finished their lifetime, they can transition to a resource center. And finally, we have targeted research in technician education, and that's really an effort to say we have a portfolio of awards, lots of very innovative, amazing things going on. Coming from a community college, I always knew how important it was to meet the student where they were and to try and support them moving to what their goal was. Not necessarily what my goal was, but what was their goal. And so we do a lot of things. We've got just-in-time learning. We've got math used in just-in-time, and contextualized math. Lots of different things. Mentoring. Why is mentoring so important? Lots of different things. It would, in a way, it's nice to have somebody come in and say, we could do a metadata study on all of the projects across different disciplinary areas that are involved in, pick your topic area. It could be mentoring. It could be contextualized math. It could be any number of internships. Why is an internship so important? So those are the 4 tracks. And if we look a little bit more closely at ATE projects, this gives you an idea that you can be pretty creative coming into this program. It could be that a new large manufacturing company has moved into your regional area, and you know they're going to need a workforce, and you approach them and you talk about it, but you don't actually have a program that would support that particular industry. So maybe you work with that industry partner to develop a whole new program. But you'd also want to know, are there other things that have been developed for that industry through ATE, or even through, I don't know, it could be TACT or any, like a Department of Labor award, something along those lines. So in that case, if there's something there that you know exists at another institution somewhere in the United States or wherever, you might say, well, what we really want to do is adapt and implement something that's there. We're still going to have to develop some new things, but we can develop our program that way. Well, if you're going to develop a new program, chances are you're going to want to do professional development for your faculty. And while you're developing a new program, you're probably developing new curricular materials. So you can see how a single ATE project could sort of pick and choose its way through a lot of the things that are offered through this or described within the solicitation. Teacher preparation is there. I think that's particularly important if you're reaching down into your high schools, and maybe you want a dual credit course to engage students a little earlier than when they walk onto your 2-year campus. So that's there. Adapt and implementation is there. Instrumentation with curriculum updates is there, and that would be, let's say you have that, you have a program. Let's go back to that same industry that moves into your area. And they say, you know, you've got a basic program, but you know, you haven't really updated it, and technology has advanced and changed. And you know, one of the things you need is the latest X trainer. And you go, well, wow, you know, as a 2-year institution, it's kind of tough to get a lot of money for instrumentation. That's where your industry person writes a letter that says, to bring your students up to the level that they would expect to hire, you need new instrumentation. And that can be anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 over 2 to 3 years. At the same time, hopefully your partner, your industry partner, says, not only do I think this is essential, but I'm more than happy to work with you to update your curriculum materials as well. And then finally, there's a section under projects called ATE coordination networks. And this is really an effort to, I think, stretch us, make us think outside of our world of 2-year institutions and maybe that one industry, big industry partner that's in your area. Who else might be involved? Who else would benefit you, and you could benefit them by bringing them into a network? Could be a trade association, a professional society, maybe more of the 4-year institutions. You know, something along those lines that pushes it. It really pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone. But that's really what those are all about. Okay, so if we can check out the next slide. I'm available for questions now and later. And I can turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Celeste. You know, we will ask some questions now and come back to you later, but here's one. What about eligibility? Who can submit these grants? Can I, Mike Lasecki, write a proposal to the NSF?
Yes, you absolutely can. Pretty much, depending on how you are organized. In a lot of cases, people think of institutions coming in, which is fine. I think as long as you are an accredited institution, there's actually a definition within the proposal preparation guide, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that states all of the eligible entities that can submit to the National Science Foundation. But I believe that even a single person could. The issue with a single person coming in is that you would have to be able to pass the criteria in the division of grants and agreements and in cost analysis and pre-award checking that you could handle federal funds. So, but other than that, 501c3s, LLCs come in, 2-year, 4-year. There's a whole set of people who come in, and institutions and entities that come into the National Science Foundation.
Okay, good. Now here's an important question everyone sometimes hesitates to ask it, but what are my chances of success here? Is there some statistics that show I have a 1 in X chance of getting a proposal if I submit it?
I'm going to take my program officer hat off for a minute because I'm actually not supposed to throw that out.
Take off your hat. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I'm taking my hat off. And I'm saying, as someone who's watched the ATE program over the years, it seems to me that the program officers in ATE stick pretty close to having, overall, over the entire program, at least a 30 to 35% success rate. Okay, and one of the other things that happens is we have some mentoring, special mentoring projects. The Mentor Connect project, which I think we'll probably talk a little bit about today, they actually have a more than 70% success rate as they mentor people in crafting a proposal and then submitting it. So it kind of gives you an idea, at least it's a range, and it's better than the overall NSF success rate of 17%.
So listening to what you said, I have to write 3 proposals to get 1. Well, what you mean is I have to write one really good one to get 1. Yes.
Right. That's it. Write one really good one.
Because it means it's competitive. That's really what it means, isn't it?
It is. It is.
All right, excellent. We're going to do one more question, and then we're going to go on to listen to some of our center colleagues. Are there any restrictions for the fields that one can submit? I mean, suppose I'm in wireless communications. Suppose I'm in healthcare. Are there restrictions?
So really, probably the biggest restriction would be the National Science Foundation supports pretty much a huge chunk of all of the science outside of the biomedical area that's supported in the United States. So because we have the National Institutes of Health and their focus area is biomedical, all of the health-related, whether it's dental hygiene, dental assisting, radiation technology, all of those allied health programs are not going to be eligible to come into the National Science Foundation. And I wish I could say, oh, but go check out NIH because they have these great programs. They actually, for the most part, don't. It's one of the holes that's there that I would be more than happy to see filled. Unfortunately, it's not going to come from NSF because NSF is a very small federal agency as compared to NIH, which is huge.
I know.
Other than that, oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, other than that, when you think about ATE, think about any industry where technology is impacting the industry such that a person who wanted to get a job needed skills and competencies that they didn't get, I don't know, maybe even 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe it would be the need to understand something about cybersecurity, even if you are going to be doing robotics in a manufacturing area.
That's a very good point. By the way, what's the funding level for the program at the ATE program at NSF for this year? Oh,
yeah. So currently this year, for fiscal year 20, we have $75 million, which is a lot of times people think about TACT at the $2 billion range, and they go, well, that's a pretty small program. But that's actually pretty large for the National Science Foundation. And the current bills that are going through, I talked about reauthorization of ATE, they are proposing a doubling of the budget for next year, and at least for the next 6 years. So that would mean if the money is authorized, appropriations can say, or reauthorization can say, we think it should go to this. But if they don't appropriate the funds, that's where it gets a little sticky.
Sure.
But the reauthorization bill is saying $150 million next year.
Very exciting. I'm sure that causes you to stay up late at night thinking about these things.
It does.
All right, Celeste, thank you. A bunch of questions in our chat window. We'll come back to you, and thank you for joining us today in the midst of all your busy schedule. Your audio was particularly good today, so that's good. So let's go ahead and take us to hear about some of those new technologies from the National Center for Autonomous Technologies. Jonathan Beck is joining us. Go ahead, Jonathan. The floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Mike, and good morning to the West Coast, good afternoon to the East Coast, and welcome to everyone in between. I'm John Beck, the Executive Director and Principal Investigator for the National Center for Autonomous Technologies, which was recently funded under the NSF ATE program. I'm glad to have this audience here today to talk about the really amazing opportunities that exist inside the ATE network and community. And with that, I'll go ahead and dig right into the content for today. First slide, innovation born in surreal times. As we look at the state of education, I think this group recognized all of the challenges that are out there, the dynamic environment, and a lot of that is the result of advancing technology. As we look at the instant access to information, the do-it-yourselfer platforms like YouTube for different learning environments, the instant connection to people across the globe with social media, there's been a lot of dynamics that are really changing some of the thought processes and the way that we need to be thinking about education and different opportunities that we can seek. A lot of times it's involving new strategies, new technologies, teaching on new technologies. We look at the students we have coming to the classroom in technical education, and a lot of times there's a lot higher percentage of non-traditional students who, like Celeste just referred to, are looking at upskilling as a result of advancing technology in their industry. As we look at the traditional college student, if there is still such a thing that we can kind of classify as right out of high school, a lot of times the students that we're seeing at the two-year technician level are working a full-time job or multiple full-time jobs, and they're looking at flexible options, new delivery methods, being able to meet them based on those life skills. And I know this group is one that's constantly focused on that. And then we have a global pandemic that hits that requires social distancing overnight. There's a lot of challenges out there, but it's great to have this group here today as you look at the ATE community and the opportunities that exist. If you're familiar, you can probably relate to a lot of the bullet points on the right-hand side of this slide. If you're new, you'll quickly see that the ATE community is really full of the innovators and change agents. It's full of people that seek out new opportunities to advance technician education in the classroom and stay current and address those challenges that Celeste was talking about. It's a group that really meets those challenges head on, and you'll quickly find that there's a number of different resources out there to help you as you're thinking about some of those same concepts and best practices that have already been implemented. Taking a step back, again, NCAT was funded just this past year. It takes a while to get a center online, and a couple months into having the full-time staff and team on board, we've got the global pandemic that hit. So we're asking the question, so now what? As you look at the bottom of the slide, it identifies a lot of the co-PIs and senior personnel and collaborators for the center. A lot of the names might be well recognized out there. And as we look at the springtime going into the summer, a lot of these organizations play leadership roles in things like educator workshops, STEM camps, global student competitions. So we're looking at what a lot of organizations we're doing is, what is this timeline going to look like? What events should we start planning to cancel? What events should we think about an on-site delivery as well as an off-site or a distance delivery mode, dual planning, and when do we think we're going to get back to normal? And with the daily updates, with the status of COVID, it became clear that those were shifting timelines that created a lot of uncertainty. So the team made a distinctive turning point to cancel the events through the fall. All the on-site events, instead of focusing on dual delivery methods and shifting timelines, we decided to really focus the team's efforts on distance delivery resources that could meet the current need but would also serve as resources to enhance our long-time offerings of those different events for workshops, STEM camps, outreach initiatives, and student competitions. So one of the first things we did was assembled the team, the SMEs that have been involved in a lot of distance delivery modalities, both internal NCAP partners as well as collaborators to the center. We've got a webinar series that we started. The first one was a high-level overview of everything from virtual reality, augmented reality, video capture, content packaging, different platforms for meeting conferencing like what we're in today. That one was not captured or recorded. However, the two subsequent ones have been. And you can find those resources on our website, ncatech.org. One hosted by the Visualization Lab, it's thing called STATE, which was around the concept of virtual reality for social engagement. And the additional one was hosted by Clemson University and the Center for Aviation and Automotive Virtual E-Learning Schools, which has been a long-term funded NSF resource out there that we are partnering with as we look at the distance resources that we're developing. Coming up, and I'll talk about it in the next couple of slides, we've got some webinars that we'll be hosting on video production geared towards faculty, both training sessions as well as evaluation of some of the equipment resources that are out there and user-friendly products and how to go through that. And then content packaging, looking at the different audiences we serve and the best platforms to be able to serve up this type of information. As we went through that process, there's definitely some considerations for this group if you're currently going through that process or you're looking at submitting an application or digging into the distance delivery environment. One thing we've seen is the equipment supply is in high demand right now. One of the reasons we haven't been able to complete the video productions webinar is because although we ordered up the equipment over 2 months ago, we actually had pieces that were just showing up in the past week here. So there's been a long lead time on some of that equipment. In addition to that, it's the same thing that we've seen with some of the VR equipment and other resources, just accounting for long lead times, as this isn't a unique circumstance to our organization, but this is something a lot of organizations are looking in. As we acquire those resources, the video production kit, we actually worked with our partners across NCAT, as well as some of the professional video production companies that have supported them in the past to identify a very user-friendly kit geared towards faculty, where this will be a resource they can check out and record sessions from their basement if that's their converted lab these days, or if they actually have access to the school facilities, they could check out this kit to be able to record content in their labs. And what we've seen is, beyond the NCAT partners, a lot of the institutions, other programs at our institutions have seen the value in this and have made those same investments now that we have that identified, and we'll be working towards development of training videos to help out with storyboarding and that process of going through content development. And then one other consideration that our team has been looking at is that level of complexity for things like the virtual environment that you need to deliver based on different technical areas, and how that relates to the audience or participants that you want engaged in that activity, because different levels definitely require different levels of investment. So just making sure as we develop that, we're thoughtful about the access requirements that participants will have. The ancillary benefits, we look at the engagement of the traditional students coming through the program and the appetite for new technology and exploration. We see this as a way to really create curiosity as we look at some of the distance tools and training aids that we're incorporating and supporting active learning. One of the things we'll be doing for our October educator workshop that's hosted at the Northland Aerospace site and is one of the geotech regional workshops, is converting that to fully immersive virtual environment. So it'll be a facility replica that participants can actually walk through to see that full environment, to walk into the labs where they'd typically be conducting those activities and accessing live streaming and recording video depending on what the activity is. As we've explored that concept with other departments at our institution, we've stumbled upon some of the other challenges across the college, like student recruitment, the fact that we haven't been able to get students in the labs in our prime time for prospect students, getting them interested in seeing the hands-on experience that's part of the educational process and what their future career looks like. So these type of tools we're looking at as an additional resource that can support some other aspects and interests that the college is currently working around. And then we know the technology that we're using increases collaboration. It's going to be technology that becomes more and more commonplace for the future workforce. So making sure we're cognizant of that and incorporating that into the classroom is going to be really important. Thinking long term, our response, although it's been a rapid response and we've really looked at still meeting the initial scope that we set out to do through NCAT, we're looking at doing it in a much different way, or incorporating this distance concept much more quickly than what would have been done before. But it's not just a response to the current situation. We really look at these responses and what we're doing as long-term enhancements to the resources that will support all the different activities that I mentioned. And really, those different activities outside of the traditional classroom allow us a lot of flexibility to experiment, see what works well, what doesn't work as well, to be able to hit the concepts that we'll need to with our traditional classrooms as well. So it's really an opportunity to explore the technology and think about the incorporation into the traditional classroom as well. The other aspect of it is really the audiences that we'll be able to reach out to. With these resources, there'll be open educational resources on our website available for participants of a much larger number to be able to access, and audiences that we may not have reached out to before. So it's really increasing the access to these resources that'll be developed through the team, through the center, and available for use. And again, working with organizations like CAVES, we'll be really working on that. They've got very academically regimented processes for the digital content development, processes to really evaluate the effectiveness of those resources, and models to continuously improve those resources based on that process. So looking forward to working with partners like that and having a continuous improvement model for these distance resources. This last slide, just kind of the mindset. There's always challenges with technology, and that's well recognized. A lot of times you can look at technology and there's lots of complications that it can bring into the mix when you're teaching on it or when you're utilizing it for teaching, things that just don't go right. Sometimes it limits access. We've seen that as we've seen this mass transition, especially in secondary education. I've got 3 daughters in school, and I know one of the school focuses was how students are going to access internet, how they're going to have the devices to be able to complete the courseware. So there are some of those limiting factors that need to be taken into account. And then doing things differently isn't always popular on the front end, but I think what you'll find with the NSF ATE community is a mindset where people really look at technology as a way to advance our education, create new opportunities, enable new ways of learning that never would have been possible in a traditional classroom through things like these virtual and distance resources. And technology innovation is really about trying new things. Some work, some don't. And what I've found with a lot of proposals out there, the things that don't work, there's still a lot of value in that if people provide those best practices back to the community. And that's a big focus, is that everything doesn't have to be successful, but learning about those gaps or barriers is important and something that the community seeks out. And with that, I think I'm close to on time. So I'll go ahead and open it
You are, Jonathan.
for questions
Thank you
and
very
turn
much.
that back to you, Mike.
And thank you for those thoughtful remarks. Got a couple of questions for you. You have a lot of partners at your center, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of the ATE program as well. Would you recommend someone who's developing a project grant that they seek other college partners, or if a project approached you as a national center to partner, would you be willing to talk about that? What's your view on partnerships as you develop proposals?
Yeah, going back almost to the first slide or second slide, that is something you find with the NSF ATE community. It's very collaborative in nature. I think part of that is a result of the stakeholders, the two-year community and technical colleges serving the local communities, and not necessarily as much of a competitive nature to some of the other organizations that may be funded under different federal sources. You really find people wanting to share ideas, best practices, their experience, and that's definitely something, if you're going to be writing a proposal, to use those resources. So Les kind of highlighted how to go in and look at the program solicitation. You also want to look at previously funded projects that are out there and how their work may tie to yours. And when you make those reach outs, I get those all the time, and you'll find a very positive response of people who want to help support you based on their previous experience and what you want to do.
Boy, I totally agree with you there, Jonathan. It's really a community that likes to work together. Let me take you back one slide, if I can. I just did it. I was so impressed with the way that you described the NSF ATE mindset. And I think if someone was constructing a proposal for the first time, or the nth time for that matter, I think if they thought about these themes, right, they really strike me as good ones. There's advances and opportunities, there's complications, there's limiting access, but there's new ways of enabled to learn. I like what you did here. And I think that's one of the successful things of your own center, that you're approaching these things head on, aren't you?
Every day. Great team, experienced PIs from multiple centers across the country, folks who are new to ATE, and it's an amazing team and network that's come together to really take on these issues head on and seek out those opportunities.
Excellent, Jonathan. Thanks for the points that you made today, where we looked at how one national center effort is approaching these things, how they're interested in partnerships, and the way that they approach what they're doing. It's really a good model for ATE. Jonathan, thanks. We'll have you hang on with us, maybe come back at the end for some more questions. But let's now go ahead and hear from Michelle Norgren. Michelle is the director and PI of the Vesta National Center. And Michelle, I was noticing that your center says grape and wine education for the 21st century. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike and Celeste and everyone, and for inviting me and allowing me to participate in this session. Yes, we are Vesta, and we are the Grape and Wine Education Program, and we represent really the agriculture and agriculture production and value-added production type of industry, which is very different from the industry that you just heard about. So let's take just a little bit and give you a little bit of an overview of Vesta and our world, and then we'll relate that back to our students and the challenges we have had both in delivery to our students from the onset, but also the delivery to our students and the engagement of our students during this pandemic. So just to give you a little overview and make sure my sound is working okay, good, I see that, thank you. So let's look at what's in a bottle of wine. We talk about economic impact, the wine producers, and you'll notice that there are wine producers in all 50 states. There are grapes grown in all 50 states. There's over 1.7 million jobs, 75.8 billion in annual wages. The tourist industry, and then tourist expenses or expenditures that are related to that, the taxes that are collected. So you are looking at a massive industry, and actually one of the largest industries in specialty crops. So it is the highest valued, high value crop of all of the specialty crops that are out there. So when Vesta came along, we've been a center since, or a project and in existence since 2003. And the original concept was we had a huge industry beginning to grow west of the, or east of the Rockies. And so those states that were interested in growing grapes and locally value-added industry. But how do you support that kind of industry when you do not have the educational facilities to do that? Most of our students are unable to pick up and go. They can't necessarily pack up and go to Fresno or UC Davis in California or Virginia Tech or Cornell on the East Coast, but they reside rurally, geographically place-bound, if you wish. But we needed a knowledgeable industry to support, or knowledgeable workforce to support this industry. So Vesta then looked at how do we do that. We began looking and went directly to, as all of us do, is our industry. So we relied on our industry to help guide the design of how we reach out to the workforce needs. We also recognize the accessibility challenges. Like I said, they are generally rurally located and travel limited. We'll talk a little bit more about the technology, and this has definitely evolved over time. From the very beginning, when many of our students were coming to us via satellite, I don't know whether it was satellite located at the highest tree on their property, but we were definitely challenged by connectivity. We also wanted to look at for credit. There were other distance programs out there, but Vesta developed a plan to become a for credit so that you do have the opportunity to get a for credit certificate or associate degree through our partnership of institutions. And then, again, industry validated, always going back to our industry to go back to them. Are we delivering and developing those things that are valuable to our industry, that are needed for a qualified workforce to support the industry? And we ended up developing basically on a kind of a three-legged stool. Currently, Vesta has 39 online courses in 3 different educational tracks: viticulture, which is grape growing; enology, which is the winemaking side; and wine business entrepreneurship. The interesting thing about the wine business entrepreneurship is that our students encourage the development of that track. We were doing a great job teaching our students how to grow grapes and how to manage a vineyard and be the production side of the agriculture component. And then we were doing a great job teaching our students how to make wine or how to become those cellar masters and cellar operators. But many of these individuals in this industry east of the Rockies is that they are entrepreneurs. They were wanting to develop their business, and they were struggling with how to do that. And they said, it doesn't do us any good for you to teach us how to become wonderful winemakers if we cannot sell our product. And so thankfully, ATE also recognized that there is an entrepreneurship quality to many of the different aspects that are found in ATE, and they included the idea of entrepreneurship in one of their proposal, or one of their RFPs. So we immediately jumped on that with the advice of our students. So students currently have an opportunity that they can select an individual course to simply take what they need and get out. They can work towards a technical certificate or an Associate of Applied Science degree. We work with 2 amazing co-PIs. Dr. Ann Fennell from South Dakota State oversees our viticulture program, and Dr. Barry Gump from Florida International University and an emeritus professor from CSU Fresno oversees our enology. The other unique thing that we'll talk a little bit about in Vesta is that we have a dedicated instructional designer. Our courses, let me go on, make sure I get the next slide. And then we also support our online courses with field practicums, workshops, and virtual reality and virtual modeling. Our courses are delivered as a partnership of institutions. And we have, like I said, a three-legged stool. So we have the online courses that have a live component as well as asynchronous. We have the second leg of that stool is the, well, part of it is the asynchronous, excuse me, and then the live component, the other leg, and then the actual hands-on field practicums. So each one of our courses has some component of hands-on either in the field or through workshops. Our online or our field practicum is one of the essential pieces of our program. I'm a very strong supporter, and we've been active in online delivery and distance education since our inception because of the challenges that brought forth from our students being where they are located. So it became necessary for our students to work with a number of industry partners. So currently we have over 600 industry partners in 41 states and 6 foreign countries. So the students have an opportunity to, and the design of Vesta is to come to the student wherever the student might be. And through a combination of industry partners that we have established or partners that the students bring forth, especially in the field of viticulture. Wineries are a little easier to find because they have to be licensed and therefore they're registered. Vineyards, however, can be small or large and can be found pretty much anywhere. So our students do a lot of recommending a site that they would like to go to. But Vesta works alongside these commercial sites. And at each one of these commercial sites is an industry mentor that has agreed up front to all of the skills and the tasks that that student is expected to complete and works hand in hand to guide them through that. So we are a blending of synchronous education, and the synchronous, that has been an evolution. Like I said, connectivity has always been a challenge with our students rurally located. In the very beginning, our connectivity was simply text chat. Not the best use of time, but that was what we had to work with. And then we went to other platforms that were a live component that provided a little bit more of that real-time chat and discussion. What I've always told our students and what I tell my faculty is that today is the worst the technology will be. It will always be getting better. So when we talk about even Adobe Connect as we're connecting today, and if somebody's bandwidth is getting a little wonky, today's the worst it will be. Things will get broader, get stronger, get faster, and it will just get better from here. The other thing is the asynchronous side, which is the opportunity for students to access their learning modules, their courses, their content 24/7, and allows them to fit it into their schedule. Our students are not typical students. They are primarily adults. Our average age of our students is 44. With our oldest student that we've had was somewhere, I think he was 82 when he began the program and told us how he was enjoying his TV classes. That's what he called his computer, was his TV. And then we have a number of more and more younger students and more traditional age students that are coming into the program and looking at beginning in this industry from an early age. So we have a broad range of students. And with that broad range comes the challenges of all of the other pressures on a student's time. So the idea of being asynchronous and able to fit into that student's time makes it a little bit easier. And mobile compliant. We have, like I said, all of our courses have a live component that is compatible with all the different mobile technologies, and we have many students, especially in the fall, that will be harvesting in the vineyard at the same time that they are attending their live class from their phone in their pocket. So they are maximizing their time. Vesta is definitely a partnership. Listening to Jonathan before, he talked about the number of partners across, and between our 2-year and 4-year university partners and college partners across the U.S., our industry partners in the form of wineries and vineyards across the U.S. and around the world. And then we have currently, since our inception, have had over 6,000 enrollments. And our students, because of the fact that the program comes to them, wherever they happen to be, we've had students from 48 states, District of Columbia, and 12 foreign countries. And we really enjoy the opportunity to reach out and show that broad footprint and representing. When we talk about Vesta and we talk about grape and wine, it is interesting that the go-to everybody assumes is California. The advantage to coming out of Missouri and being the central part of that, you can see it radiates out from the center of the country outward and is able to support any student regardless of where they are. Even in those beautiful states of California, Oregon, and Washington that have rich educational resources, they still have students who are challenged with being able to travel to a particular location and attend the traditional class. So we'll back up just a little bit. As we move forward during this pandemic, one of the blessings of Vesta has been that we were already online. We were already delivering online courses in a rigorous format with our instructors from all over the nation and all of our educational partners. The challenge became the field practicum component. And with our students being everywhere, it really depended on where they were and the impact that COVID had at the time they were in their class. So the real adjustment that we had to make on our end was more of a time period of allowing the students to complete and working with their mentor. If their field site was not experiencing anything from the pandemic and they didn't have any restrictions or lockdown, there really wasn't any change for that particular student. In some students, the wineries were shut down, the tasting rooms were shut down, and they were really unable to do anything. And so we allowed the opportunity for a student to take an incomplete, move that forward in time, and come back and revisit that field component when that opportunity was available to them. So it became, in all of our partner schools that deliver our courses, we're very flexible to work with the student, work with the mentor in how to allow the student to fulfill those needs as they go forward. Our workshops, we have 2 critical hands-on workshops that were canceled, and we are looking at refurbishing those into a way that either if we still need to come together face-to-face, we do it with social distancing, or we do it in a virtual manner that can be done synchronously, much like our format today, where the students would have kits and work with at their location, but still be able to communicate through Zoom or some other similar thing. And I probably went through that maybe a little quickly. Is there any questions that I can answer for anyone?
There are some, Michelle, but first let me make a comment. I mean, you have such an interesting approach where you look at this hybrid of asynchronous, asynchronous, the deep partnership with industry, the way that students use their jobs to support their thing. I think those are all hallmarks of a very unique approach to ATE. So thank you for explaining that so well. Here's a question for you. Are all of your classes for credit, or do you do some non-credit offerings as well?
Currently, all of our classes are for credit. Like I said, they do lead towards those different tracks. The other advantage to that is it does make them then all financial aid eligible. We are looking at exploring a non-credit version, more of a professional development option, and not being restricted by the time constraints of what a traditional semester or trimester might look like. So we are exploring that,
Sure.
but currently all of our classes are for credit.
You know, I think one of the things that you said got my attention. I wrote it down. The technology will always be better than it is today. That's my hope as well, so I'm really glad to hear you say that. You know, there's chemistry associated with wine. Are you able to give students the experiences of those lab experiences, either via the kits or working with their industry situations? How do you do that?
Exactly. We do offer chemistry, both a general chemistry course as well as our specialty wine chemistry class. On the wine chemistry side, we do have a face-to-face 2-day workshop where they come in and do intensive lab for 2 days. That is one of the ones that may have to adjust a little bit as we go forward, and we are looking at some virtual ways to do that on the chemistry side. We also have the chemistry that the students will participate when they are in their field practicums. So when they are working in the cellar at a particular winery, they will be participating in one of their skills to master is those lab tests that they need to do, the wine testing, the must, which is the grapes when they're all mushy and fermenting, and those kinds of tests that go along in the entire winemaking process. So yes, in answer to your question, that is definitely a critical piece, as is the microbiology that is involved. So we've got chemistry, we have microbiology, and then all of the plant taxonomy and plant growing aspects when you talk about the vineyard, and the understanding of plant pathology and how all of that works in order to grow good product.
Great, Michelle. Thank you. We see both from you and Jonathan so far just unique approaches that people could get ideas as they're developing their own ATE proposals. They could say, oh yeah, I could stress that, or I could.
Oops. I lost your sound there, Mike. Are you still there? Mike's audio is out. Speaking of technology working well, I did see a question pass through here, and if it's time for me to stop talking, somebody can raise a flag. On the international side, we have students that are abroad that participate in the class. And again, because of the online nature, they simply need to apply. No, they do not need to be a American student to participate, because of the fact that they will not they most likely will never set foot in the country. So they get the opportunity of taking the education online from their particular location. It also serves the military well. So those students that are U.S. citizens but are stationed abroad in the military have an excellent opportunity to participate in this. We've had military students be able to do their field practicums in Germany or in France or Italy, where they happen to be stationed. So hopefully that answers the question on international. And when they do their field component, when they're overseas, they again identify that location, and the mentor follows the same prescription of activities and things that they commit to leading the student through as an American company would.
Thank you, Michelle. This is Ellen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Since I think Mike is still off and troubleshooting volume and audio, I'm going to go ahead and advance to Kevin Cooper so we can keep moving, and then we will have a question break towards the end of this as well. So keep the questions coming, and we do have them noted. Thanks, Michelle. Kevin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us Thanks, Ellen. I got knocked off 5 minutes ago, so don't be surprised if I get knocked off again, like Mike. Ellen, can you hear me okay? I just want to make, before I go forward too fast, everything okay sound-wise?
Yes, sounds great. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so I'm Kevin Cooper. I'm the PI of an ATE center. I'm also the dean at a local community college, and we have a new grant where we're helping other schools as well. First time I've used my COVID background for a slide deck. I don't know if it's good or bad. It is. So I want to talk about a couple things I heard in this call. Celeste started the call with the value of ATE funding, and then you heard from two speakers about what they're doing and how they're responding. And I just want to emphasize one point you heard very well so far is ATE funding is really dynamic and nimble, especially important in this time where things are changing on a daily basis. But what you heard from the last two speakers is it helps you create a huge network and to bounce ideas off of, to steal best practices, et cetera, which is super also important now. And you actually heard at the very beginning from Celeste and again is the interdependence of various fields that ATE has. But I think probably one of the most important things about ATE funding that comes into play right now is it's probably the only source of funding that I know of that is risk tolerant. In fact, they promote risk. They want you to try new things to change the world and change the socioeconomic things going on. And in a day and age where community colleges are being defunded by every other mechanism, most schools are becoming risk adverse. This is an avenue to test new ideas and to solve problems quickly. And my whole presentation today is based on that. I'll give a really brief background of who we are, what we do, just so you know where we come from. We're a nuclear center. We train for all nuclear technician fields, and there's a surprisingly large number of jobs in nuclear energy and cleanup of the Cold War, which is what we call environmental management, even plant and life sciences, making isotopes, and there's a ton of manufacturing that uses nuclear technology, anything from MRI machines to making tires, cross-linking tires. We have partnerships across the nation. We've been around for about a decade now, and every year we graduate. Our biggest claim to fame is we graduate about 300 to 500 students from our partners, and they get pretty high-paying jobs. It averages about 80 grand a year now for a 2-year degree at about 60 partner locations. So that's who we are and what we do. And I'm telling you about our program details because it's really important to understand how we transition pre-COVID to post-COVID. So a typical school has a cohort. They bring them in, and the group stays together Mondays, same schedule for 2 years, Mondays, Wednesdays, or Tuesdays, Thursdays all day. They have 24 kids in the first year and 24 kids in the second year. So a typical school has about 48 kids enrolled. Across the nation pre-COVID, I would say about 80% of this was online. Probably only the gen eds were not online. Typical program has 50% hands-on and 50% lecture. There's a ton of industry certifications embedded in it. Every program had an internship at their major employer, and most recruiting for these programs was eyeball to eyeball, direct recruiting, outreach, bringing kids to campuses. So those are all the things we had to combat with, and then this happened, and we had to figure out how to maintain a program that is still needed nationwide, that will still be needed for a long time, with new boundary conditions on all of us, and daily change in boundary conditions. And so I go back to what you heard at the beginning. The best thing to solve a problem is to bring together smart people and work on it, and that's where an AT network really helped. We had a ton of online resources that we could help schools. A lot of schools, even a lot of the schools on this call, programs that had never been online were online 2 weeks later. And that's because of a lot of resources that were available in the world and a lot of resources developed through the AT network. The other part is it's dynamic personnel and dynamic budgets. Everyone involved in AT, when you go to these conferences, you see them talking to people in all sorts of disciplines and learn and stealing ideas, like at the beginning of the call. Cyber ideas apply to robotics as much as any place now. So you see a lot of folks stealing ideas, and ATE is probably the most flexible federal agency for you to move money around as needed so that you can deal and address issues as they come up, so you can come up with good solutions. So that said, I'm going to jump to what we did and how we help people. We help people very specifically during this crisis, before and after this crisis as well, with curriculum. We developed a huge repository of curriculum. We help people figure out continuity of operations, how to keep going, and we helped really figure out how to redesign marketing and outreach. And my next couple of minutes is really about some best practices in each. On the curriculum front, we were very fortunate to bring experts together for many years. So we had developed 18 courses that were fully online. They're on our website if anyone wants to go to gonuke.org. And what's nice about them is they were developed modularized. So they were developed so you can take one learning outcome and take the material associated with it, cartridge or modules, whatever you call it. They were developed actually to Quality Matter standards and built for Blackboard, so they work with almost any learning content management system. We also have a full environmental management AS degree, and we have some virtual reality resources like you see the student there doing, which is our flow loop, which is fully available, and these procedures work in all sorts of environments, manufacturing, production. So immediately when COVID hit, we sat down and we said, how can we help schools? So we sent out an email to our network of schools, which is a couple hundred big, and we said, we have all this material, we can help you get it online, get us in touch with your learning content management folks or virtual college, whoever it is, we want to provide the curriculum and get you online. And a number of schools took use of that, and it really helped transition. I think about 6 schools transitioned fully through our material, and we helped them, and it's just that network that helps. So we had the material. Most people probably forgot about it. There's a lot of other things in people's minds when COVID hit. But the reminder and the network we had helped them remind them that we had this material. The next thing was continuity of operations. Got more calls on this than anything else. I have to say Indian River State College did a tremendous job of keeping critical courses open in nursing and public safety, and we were allowed to keep some open. But we had to figure out how to do it. So it was a trial and error basis, and what we wound up doing, it worked well for us, is we took a class and we broke it down into 2 groups, a 10-student group and a 10-student group, and we staggered the training. So 10 students came in at one time and 10 came in another, and it was really based on the size of the room and how we can space everyone and which instructors felt comfortable coming back. We moved 70% of it online and 30% of it in person, and that's the way we designed schedules going forward with a bunch of schools. And if you think about it, most courses are 3 credits. So if 30% had to repeat it twice, faculty members doing 30% more work, or 33% more work. So if you can come up with a model through grants or through talking to your finance office where you can pay them 30% more, so pay them 1 extra credit versus what they typically got, then a lot of faculty were encouraged to come back and do a staggered schedule where 7 kids come in one time, or 14 or 12 based on the size of the room, and then they repeat it one more time. It's not the same work as if it's in a whole nother class and doing all the lectures again and then having it's 1/3 more work. So we really helped a lot of schools with continuity operations and how to bring them back by talking to some of our best practices. The last one was a pretty exciting one. The last part that I'll get into is marketing and outreach. So the second COVID hit, it was apparent that there wasn't going to be a lot of large events for any time soon. I don't really know when large events are going to happen. We host events anything from 2,500 students, where we bring all graduating seniors to college and they rotate through sections, to just classroom visits. And that is the key recruiter for a majority of our STEM programs. So how do you transition? Well, being a father of elementary, middle, and high school children, I noticed that their day wasn't totally filled. The teachers, and give credit to every teacher in the country, they transitioned online, but it's really hard for anybody who's done any
He was just getting to the best
Ellen,
part.
I'm back. Can anyone hear?
Yes, we can hear you,
Mike, can
Kevin.
you
Go
hear me?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you lose me on the marketing and outreach slide?
Yes, you were just getting to the best part.
So the best part was it was very hard to figure out how to transition online for marketing and outreach. Everybody in the country for our STEM programs does a primarily large portion of their recruitment in person. Large events, small events, it doesn't matter, but that's obvious. That was going to change. And having children in the K through 12 system, I have an elementary, middle, and high school children. I noticed that the teachers had done a great job of trying to fill a schedule, but overnight it's very hard to be an instructional designer and fill a whole day worth of schedule. So I thought there might be some openings there. And so we reached out to some schools and we said, would you mind if we take an hour of your time one day and talk about programs at the college or programs through RCNet nationwide? We can bring an industry expert, a academic expert, and myself, and we can have the students ask us questions. And to be honest, every school I called signed up for it. I had boys and girls clubs calling me. I had schools. We did 5 national ones where we had over 100 students on the call. And it was great marketing and outreach. This environment of video really works well with the younger generation. They like asking questions. They like to be able to multitask behind the scenes. They probably pay equal amount of attention. And it solves a problem point of K through 12, how to fill their schedule. So we did ones on cyber. We did energy ones. We had 2 ATE centers like you see on this one. You had me and Ken Walls from Create. We had industry on it. And the students asked us questions. And another beautiful thing about these platforms is you can download the chat window, and so you have all the students give you their email address, their phone number, and then you can follow up with them with the programs they want. So it was just a beautiful mechanism to do marketing and outreach. And I believe that's all I have. I want to say thank you and use a picture back when I had some here. So thank you. I'll take any questions.
Kevin, thanks very much for managing the audio thing today. You sound good. Here's a question for you. You talked about these K-12 areas, and this has come up in the chat window several times. Can a person write an ATE project that focuses exclusively on the K-12 type of effort?
So I'm not sure K-12, but high school and academic pathways, yes. I think it's high school and forward. I think it's Celeste can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's a good opportunity if you focus on academic pathways and dual enrollment and the credit associated with it, but I don't think it goes back past high school.
Good, and also in your presentation you gave us a great idea of how a center like yours or our own projects can support each other, so thank you for doing that. I had one question for you. Did you really say stealing ideas?
Disseminating best practices, Mike, but I think Celeste wants to interrupt to correct us. Celeste, I think your mic's really low.
Okay,
come on in.
So I turned it up. I might have turned it up too much. I got this little, I'm working on iPhone, talk about technology challenges. So, so what I wanted to say is think about ATE as a program that is at the National Science Foundation thanks to Congress. And the mission of the ATE program is to educate a skilled technical workforce for all of the industries in the United States that are advancing through technological change, which is, when you think about it, pretty much everything. So if Congress asks me, which they do, how are you doing? How many technicians is the ATE program turning out? What kind of industry jobs are they getting? If we have projects that only focus on grades 7 through 12, especially, sometimes people will say, well, can't we just focus on grades 6 and 7? My answer is usually, it's going to be a long time before I can respond to Congress and say that any of those students are actually going to get a job in the industry. So you have to think about what is the mission of ATE? What is its goal when you think about your project ideas? And I'll turn it back to you, Mike.
That's a great suggestion. Celeste, as long as we've got you, before we go to the next slide, this question has come up several times. Can I submit more than one proposal at a time?
Absolutely. So that's one of those places where, and I know later on one of these slides, it's going to say, please read the solicitation carefully. On the very first page of the solicitation, there is information for you on when you can submit, what is the deadline date, how many proposals from an institution could be submitted, and how many proposals could be submitted from a single person, or in other words, being a principal investigator, more than one proposal. For the ATE program, there are no restrictions on either an institution submitting more proposals than one or a person coming in on 2 or 3 different proposals. What you have to think about is what happens if all 3 of those review really well and you've asked for 6 months of support for each one of those 3 different projects. You can't get 18 months of support for a 12-month year. So something would have to change. So you want to, and I know you could say, well, yeah, but you know, when you said there's a 30% chance if I submit 3, maybe I'm going to get 1. Well, if you write really well, you had a good grant writer helping you, and you got good ideas, you might get all 3. So that's just something to keep in mind.
That's a good point, and thank you. You can see your slide that starts with reading the solicitation is up, and you've reinforced that. We've put a link to the solicitation in the chat. Go ahead and take us through these last steps, starting with choosing the right program, Terry.
Okay. So this is a slide that's titled Advice from Program Officers, and again, please read the solicitation. And I know it's not always easy. I try and make it as direct as possible, but believe me, there's a very convoluted set of steps to get anything through and published in the federal government. A lot of people look at this, and sometimes there's sort of boilerplate language in there. So that's an important, really important thing of reading the solicitation. I'll add one other that is not on here, which, well, actually it is. It's be alert to the guidelines down at the bottom. So let me wait for that. So you want to choose your right program track. I know I had, there was a question going through the chat where it said, are you going to talk more about centers? Read the solicitation. What is your idea? What is your background? Who are your industry partners? What is your sort of standing within the ATE community? In terms of, say, a project versus a center, have you ever come into this program before? If you read the language about centers, it says, we expect you to be a leader in the ATE community, to have completed several projects successfully, and to have a standing in the community that people would look to you. And, you know, whether it's Kevin in nuclear, or Michelle with viticulture and enology, or John Beck with the autonomous technologies, people recognize the names. They know that this is a person that's actually been working in this area. So you want to choose that right program track right from the start. 4 tracks: projects, small projects for institutions new to ATE, centers, or that targeted research. You want to start early. I know, I'll give you the URL for the Mentor Connect project, and Dr. Elaine Kraft, who runs that project, or is the principal investigator for it, when she gets up and starts talking about Mentor Connect, she says crafting a proposal is a little bit like having a baby. You need to start 9 months in advance. Now you'll run into people who'll say, I wrote my first proposal 2 weeks before it was due, I submitted it, and I got funded. You'll run into other people who will say, I'm on my 4th submission. If I don't get it this time, I'm not going to come back. Hopefully, we like to step in those cases as program officers and give more targeted advice to you. We don't want you to get discouraged and drop out of this, because it's really an important thing to do. The other one for ATE, it needs to be faculty driven, and it needs to be faculty-led. I know there were a few questions in the chat box as to whether or not you needed community colleges. Right in the very first description of the program, it will tell you ATE needs faculty in leadership, community college faculty or 2-year faculty in leadership roles on everything that comes into this program. So you really want that buy-in from faculty. It's really, really hard when a president or vice president in your institution says, well, I need to be the PI. You can't be the PI. And I'm putting you on there just because it says the faculty has to be there, but this is really my idea. A lot of times those don't review so well. And when you look at a president or vice president of somewhere in the administrative structure, most people, it's going to be mainly faculty that are reviewing these. They all go, you got to be kidding me. A president doesn't have time to do a project in mechatronics. They have many more things on their calendar. So you want to think about that. Please realize there's lots of help for you. As program officers, and we have, they're all on the NSF website, there's at least in ATE somewhere between 8 and 10 different program officers in different areas. We will always respond if you would like to send us a 1 to 2 page project synopsis and just say, hey, what do you think? Is this a good idea? How could I tweak it? Give me some advice. The other one is, you've already met some of the people via this webinar who would be more than happy to help you as you move forward. Whether it's a project principal investigator or the center directors, it's a very, very open community, and I think that's really important. And then last, this Be Alert to Guidelines. There's also the NSF Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, PAPPG. That's published every year, and things change from year to year. And that's the one that tells you, here's a checklist for everything you need to include in your proposal. Be sure we changed how you fill out Form X this year. So be sure you go look at the new form. It will tell you, it'll give you that guidance, so you want to be sure that you do that. And I think there's one more slide after this. Yes, here's the resource slide. So our digital portal and library is ATE Central. Everyone who gets an award through the ATE program actually archives their materials at ATE Central. ATE Central also provides you a lot of information about whether they're virtual or not, conferences, boot camps, all different kinds of things are there, and they highlight different projects. So it's a great resource to know about. The second one is that URL for the mentor-connect.org. They actually have a resource library that provides you with webinars and how to fill out forms, how do you do an NSF approved budget. They have examples that people have allowed them to use of proposals that have been funded and even some that have been declined. We also have a center on evaluation, because one of the things you want to think about if you're proposing your project is, how do I know if I really succeed? What would I need to check to say I really did this? It's pretty easy if you say, well, I want to develop one new course. You get it through the Curriculum Clearing Committee and it's offered at your institution. But sometimes you're going to want to delve a little more deeply into that. You're going to want to know, well, did I actually achieve the student learning outcomes I thought I would get? Well, how do you do that? That's where evaluation and assessment comes in. And then finally, there's the nsf.gov/ATE, which will take you to our ATE program page on the nsf.gov website. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Celeste. As we wrap up today, we're just right at the end of our time. Thank you for your comments from those from Kevin, Michelle, Jonathan. Some of the things that struck me today, Celeste, as I listened to Jonathan, he said, technology advances create opportunities. And it seems to me that could be the core of an approach to an ATE project, right? Michelle said, I
agree.
Michelle said, go where the students are. And I thought, wow, that could be a theme of a proposal, developing instructional and learning activities to take them to students. That really struck me as well. Do you agree on that one too?
Yes, I definitely do.
And then Kevin said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, he said, this is the opportunity to test out some new ideas. And I think reviewers like to see new ideas in these proposals, don't they?
Yes, absolutely.
So
it's definitely an opportunity to think about new ideas. I love Kevin's idea of there's time in quotes virtual school day these days to let students know about career pathways. Really innovative idea.
So here we are. There's money. There's opportunities here, and we're really encouraging people to consider that. That October, is it still October 1, the deadline for the proposal?
It is still October 1.
Okay, good. So folks, as we wrap up today in our last minute, consider, if you haven't already done so, maybe you've done ATE proposals before, this is an opportunity to do more. Suggest your colleagues this opportunity, and if you're new to ATE, there's a lot of resources. And Celeste, you would actually respond to an email from someone running an idea about you, wouldn't you?
I absolutely would, and so would the other program officers who work on the ATE program.
Amazing. Celeste and colleagues, Kevin, Michelle, and Jonathan, I won't ask you to come back on, but thank you again. Friends, this ends the audio portion of our webinar. I'm going to now ask you to stay with us for just a minute. I'm going to launch the survey. Take a moment to answer these brief questions in the survey. That helps us improve these webinar series. This will open in a new window. Presenters, please don't take or close this survey. Celeste and colleagues, thank you very much for joining. Ellen House, thank you. Your contact information is on the page. Thank you for being supportive and filling in for me during that little audio gap. Okay, that's it for today, colleagues. Remember, you'll get a link automatically to the recording of this webinar. Goodbye, everyone.